Ethan Plath's body was hitting the gravel, push-up after push-up, sweat pouring off his face. And this wasn't in a gym or a training field. This was at his sister Lydia's wedding rehearsal. Can you imagine? Guests arriving, chairs being lined up, flowers being arranged, and right there in the middle of it, Ethan pounding the ground like he was at war with something no one else could see. This wasn't just a workout. This was a warning sign. A crack showing through the carefully polished surface of a family trying so hard to put on the perfect show. Because on the outside, everything looked beautiful. Lydia glowed like a bride is supposed to glow, smiling, soaking in her moment, surrounded by siblings and family. The wedding prep had that Pinterest-perfect feel, coordinated colors, floral touches, a sister stepping into her big day. But underneath, tension was already spilling out, and Ethan's gravel push-ups told us what words couldn't. Something was breaking, and no amount of decorations was going to cover it up. Hi friends, I'm Sophie, and welcome back to Reality Scandals Daily. If you love raw breakdowns of the moments TV tries to polish over, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a comment, because I really want to know, do you think Ethan's push-ups were just stress relief, or was it his way of screaming without making a sound? And that's the thing with this wedding. On paper, it was about Lydia's happiness, her fresh start, her chance to celebrate love. But the rehearsal revealed something else entirely. It became the stage for family fractures that had been building for years. This wasn't just about flowers and suits. This was about control, exhaustion, secrets, and siblings who couldn't hold in their frustration anymore. Every polished smile had a shadow behind it, and every little choice from the color of a suit to who stood where became a symbol of deeper battles. The Plaths wanted to present a perfect family moment, but the truth, the cracks were already showing, and by the end, they couldn't be hidden. When it comes to weddings, we all know there's going to be debate over colors, clothes, flowers, and little details that seem small on the surface. But in families like the Plaths, those details carry so much weight. They're never just about fashion or style, they're about power, and the rehearsal for Lydia's big day made that painfully clear. The scene looked innocent enough at first. Lydia, in her usual soft-spoken way, had pictured her wedding with a certain palette. She liked hunter green. She wanted her brothers and the groomsmen to stand beside her in something that felt timeless, grounded and reflective of her vision. It was her day, after all. But when Zach stepped into the mix, that vision was rewritten before it could even fully take shape. Zach didn't just suggest an alternative. He vetoed it. Blue, he declared, was what they would wear. Not Lydia's hunter green. Not a compromise, but his decision. And the way it played out said everything about who really held the steering wheel in that moment. Lydia smiled, nodded, went along. On the outside, she looked agreeable, even grateful. But anyone watching closely could see that wasn't agreement, it was surrender. The bride's voice was overruled at her own rehearsal, and she gave in quietly, as if this was normal. And maybe in this family, it was normal. This wasn't about fabric, it was about authority. Zach wasn't just talking about a suit, he was asserting his place as the one who decides, the one who controls, the one who gets the final say even when it isn't his wedding. That little moment with colors revealed a dynamic we've seen play out across the Plath family again and again. The people who shout the loudest get their way, and the quieter ones are expected to keep the peace. Now if you look at Lydia, she's always been the peacekeeper, the one who doesn't push too hard, doesn't stir the pot, doesn't risk conflict. And here she was, right before the most important day of her life, sacrificing her own vision so Zach could feel satisfied. But while Lydia chose silence, someone else in that rehearsal didn't. Isaac noticed. He didn't blow up yet, but you could see it in his body language, in the way he carried himself. He was frustrated. The quiet brother was taking mental notes, and that frustration would eventually boil over. What stood out to me was how symbolic that color fight was. Hunter green versus blue. A bride's choice versus a brother's command. It sounds trivial. Who cares, right? But in families like this, where control has been a central theme for years, small things become battlegrounds. When someone like Zach insists on his way and gets it, it reinforces the same old cycle. The loud one wins, the quiet one swallows their feelings. And if we zoom out, this is a pattern we've seen for seasons. Think back to how Kim and Barry ran their household when the kids were growing up. Every decision, what music to listen to, what clothes to wear, who they could hang out with, was dictated from the top down. There wasn't room for individuality, not without punishment or guilt. Fast forward to now, and you still see echoes of that system. Zach might not be the parent, but in this moment, he stepped into that same role. He pulled rank, he made the call, and everyone else adjusted around him. Isaac's reaction was important, though, because Isaac isn't usually the one to speak out. He's been the steady, hard-working sibling, the one who keeps his head down and goes along. But this was different. Watching his sister's voice get pushed aside hit him in a personal way. He could see the unfairness of it, and he could feel the weight of Zach's dominance creeping into a moment that was supposed to be joyful. The rehearsal was supposed to celebrate Lydia and her future husband, but instead it became another scene in the long-running Plath family drama about who gets to control the narrative.
And the thing is, Lydia didn't fight back. She didn't grab hold of her authority as the bride. She gave it away, because that's what she's been conditioned to do. And that silence, that compliance, is exactly what builds the pressure in a family until someone eventually breaks. The suit fight might have looked like a small hiccup, but it was really a warning flare. It showed us that Lydia wasn't in full control of her own wedding. It showed us that Zach wasn't just a groomsman, he was a gatekeeper. And it showed us that Isaac, quietly watching from the sidelines, was inching closer to a breaking point. Because when you watch Isaac in these moments, it's clear he's carrying more than just frustration about suits. He's carrying years of seeing voices like his sisters pushed aside. He's carrying resentment for the way decisions always seem to be made by whoever is loudest or most forceful. And as we would later see, that bottled-up frustration wasn't going to stay quiet forever. So while the chairs were set and the decorations looked perfect, a bigger story was already unfolding. It wasn't about whether the brothers wore blue or green. It was about whether Lydia would ever be able to claim her own voice in this family, and whether Isaac could keep swallowing his anger without it exploding. That rehearsal moment with Zach revealed the truth. Control was still king in the Plath household, and peacekeepers like Lydia were still paying the price. And as much as the family tried to gloss it over with smiles and pretty backdrops, we knew the cracks were widening. The wedding wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a stage for the same old power plays, and the people in the middle of it couldn't hide their growing frustration forever. Picture this, in a family where image has always been everything, where children grew up told exactly what to wear, what to listen to, what to say, and how to present themselves to the world, the very mother who built that rigid image suddenly cracks open and admits something that no one ever expected to hear. Kim Plath, the matriarch, once the iron hand behind the rules, confessed that she had thought about starting an OnlyFans. Yes, you heard that right. The same woman who preached modesty and self-denial, who insisted her daughters cover up, and who built a household around purity, actually admitted she considered selling photos of her feet online to make ends meet. Now we need to pause here, because this moment was seismic. It wasn't just about the words, it was about what they revealed. A woman who once seemed immovable, now standing on shaky ground. A mother whose authority once seemed unshakable, now laying bare her vulnerability. After the divorce from Barry, after the collapse of their marriage, after the dust settled from years of strict parenting and broken family ties, Kim found herself staring down something she had never publicly admitted before: financial strain and the desperation that comes with it. When Kim floated the possibility of OnlyFans or feet pics, it wasn't a joke, it was a confession. And in that confession, she let us see how fragile her position had become. For decades, Kim had controlled the narrative. She was the one who decided what was appropriate, who enforced the family's isolation, who cracked down on rebellion. But here she was, stripped of that power, facing a reality that didn't bend to her rules. She wasn't in control anymore, not of her finances, not of her reputation, not even of her role as the family's moral compass. And let's talk about how this landed. The kids, especially those who had grown up under her strictest rules, couldn't ignore the hypocrisy. Imagine being told as a teenager that you couldn't wear shorts, that dating was off limits, that every move you made was monitored to protect family values. And now your mother, the same woman who drilled those values into you, is publicly admitting she thought about cashing in online with content she once would have shamed others for. The whiplash was real, and it left her children stunned, confused, and in some cases angry. Viewers had the same reaction. Some laughed at the irony, some shook their heads at the hypocrisy, and others felt a strange sort of sympathy. Because beneath the shock value was something undeniably human, a woman who had built her identity on being in control finally admitting she wasn't. Divorce had stripped away her partnership, financial realities had stripped away her comfort, and now the mask she had worn for decades was slipping. The mother, the authority figure, the enforcer of impossible rules, was now admitting she was just as lost and desperate as anyone else. And here's the deeper truth: when the mom figure cracks, the facade collapses. For years, Kim had been the glue. Toxic glue maybe, but glue nonetheless, holding the family's carefully constructed image together. She had been the one dictating what the world saw. But once she confessed to thinking about OnlyFans, once she admitted to financial struggle and desperation, the illusion shattered. The authority she once commanded evaporated. And what remained was just another flawed, struggling adult trying to figure out how to survive. For her children, this was more than a shocking soundbite. It was the dismantling of a lifelong narrative. They had been raised to believe their mother was unshakable, righteous, a pillar who knew the rules, and enforced them for everyone's good. Now they were confronted with a version of her that was fallible, hypocritical, and deeply human. And for some, that was liberating, because it proved that the rules had always been arbitrary. But for others, it was destabilizing. If the woman who taught you everything is now admitting she considered the very thing she once demonized, what does that say about your foundation? Kim's confession also tapped into a bigger theme we see in families like the Plaths. When the authority figure shows cracks, everyone else has to renegotiate their roles. The kids, who had once feared her discipline, no longer saw her as untouchable. The balance of power shifted. Suddenly, voices like Ethan's frustration, Lydia's quiet surrender, and Isaac's growing anger made more sense, because the old system was collapsing. The structure that had kept them in line was no longer functioning, and in its place was chaos, questions, and the freedom to finally push back. This moment didn't just embarrass Kim, it destabilized the entire family. Authority doesn't crumble quietly, it falls like a domino, taking every illusion with it. The kids had already been slipping away, but now the matriarch herself had handed them proof that she was no longer in control. And once that curtain was pulled back, there was no going back to the old days of strict obedience and fear. So while the wedding rehearsal might have been the stage for small battles, suits, colors, roles, Kim's confession was the earthquake beneath it all. It signaled the end of her reign as the unchallenged authority. It was a public acknowledgement that even she, the woman who once seemed untouchable, was cracking under the weight of her own contradictions. And once the mom cracks, the facade collapses for everyone. The Plaths couldn't hide behind the perfect family image anymore. The truth was out, raw and undeniable. The family wasn't just fractured, it was unraveling from the very top down. The wedding rehearsal was supposed to be about Lydia, about her big day, about family togetherness. But instead, it turned into a series of strange scenes. Ethan grinding gravel with his fists, Zach dictating suit colors, Kim cracking her image with her shocking confession. And right in the middle of it all, there was Veronica. She didn't shout, she didn't fight, she didn't perform. She just walked away. Away from the chaos, away from the noise, and straight into the pasture where the cows were grazing. On the surface, it looked like nothing. Just a girl wandering off during rehearsal, taking a moment to herself. But the symbolism, it was everything. In a family drowning in staged images and false smiles, Veronica chose animals over people. She chose calm over conflict. She chose the reality of mud, grass, and quiet breathing cows over the staged perfection of chairs lined up and fake family unity. While everyone else got sucked into the drama, she drew her own boundary, and in doing so, she said more than words ever could.
Because here's the thing. Veronica didn't storm out. She didn't throw a tantrum or demand attention. She simply redirected her energy. That decision carried weight. Because it wasn't about power, it was about peace. In a family where boundaries are almost always crossed, where control and chaos feed off each other, she showed that there is another way. You don't always have to yell. You don't always have to explode. You can quietly choose to step aside. And those cows, they weren't just background, they were symbols. Think about it. Cows are steady. They move slowly. They chew grass. They follow rhythms that don't bend to wedding rehearsals or family politics. They're grounded in the real. No staging, no pretense, no gloss. They exist in the present. And by choosing to spend her time with them, instead of engaging in the circus around her, Veronica aligned herself with reality instead of performance. She wasn't running away. She was grounding herself. That's what makes her choice so fascinating. Everyone else in the Plath orbit responded to the chaos in extremes. Ethan turned his frustration into gravel push-ups, his body absorbing pain that words couldn't express. Zach flexed control, turning a color decision into a power grab. Kim confessed desperation, shattering the authority she once held. Isaac simmered with quiet anger, building toward an explosion. But Veronica, she opted out. Her rebellion wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was in the refusal to play the game at all. And here's the deeper commentary. Veronica's walk to the cows was an act of self-preservation. It was her way of saying, I will not let this chaos consume me. That kind of boundary setting is rare in families like this, where emotional storms pull everyone in, where silence often equals surrender. Veronica showed that silence can mean something else. Resistance. She refused to give her energy to the show, and instead redirected it to something real, something stable. For viewers, this moment landed differently than the others. Ethan's push-ups drew concern. Zach's controlling behavior triggered frustration. Kim's confession shocked. But Veronica's quiet departure felt like a breath of fresh air. It was grounding, even for us watching at home. It reminded us that sometimes the healthiest move isn't to win the argument or to demand the spotlight, but to walk away and find peace in something that doesn't require your performance. In many ways, Veronica became the mirror opposite of Lydia. Lydia kept surrendering, bending, smiling through decisions that weren't hers. She gave up her hunter green suits. She softened her voice. She held back. Veronica, though, didn't surrender. She redirected. Instead of smiling through the tension, she removed herself from it entirely. That's not weakness. That's strength. She set a boundary without needing to announce it. And if we look at the larger picture, Veronica's choice carries a warning for the rest of the family. If more people follow her lead, if more siblings decide not to participate in the staged perfection, not to let themselves be consumed by controlling dynamics, then the old family script collapses faster, because power only works if everyone keeps showing up to the performance. Veronica showed that you can simply stop showing up, and the entire production loses meaning. The cows in that pasture represented the life outside the family bubble, the world that doesn't care about who gets to choose suit colors, who controls the narrative, or who pretends to have it all together. They were a reminder that peace exists, but you have to choose it. Veronica's walk wasn't just a stroll, it was a declaration. I know where my peace is, and it isn't in this circus. So while Lydia rehearsed vows under the weight of invisible battles, while Zach policed aesthetics, while Kim confessed desperation, Veronica wrote her own script. She chose authenticity over performance, boundaries over battles, cows over chaos. And in that small, quiet choice, she modeled something powerful: resistance without aggression, peace without surrender, strength without spectacle. Because at the end of the day, weddings come and go, family drama ebbs and flows, but boundaries, those are what keep a person intact. And Veronica, in that moment, showed us the quietest but perhaps strongest act of all: the refusal to be consumed by other people's need for control. She stepped away, found her calm, and left the chaos to consume itself. At first it seemed like just a slip of the tongue, a small mistake anyone could make in the blur of wedding rehearsals, names flying around, emotions running high. But when Ethan looked straight at Veronica and accidentally called her Olivia, everything stopped for a second. You could feel the air shift. It wasn't just a mix-up, it was a ghost slipping through the cracks, proof that the past Ethan has tried so hard to bury is still living inside him. Let's be clear, this wasn't about Veronica. She wasn't the trigger, she was just the stand-in, the unfortunate mirror that pulled Olivia's name back into the room. What really surfaced in that moment was Ethan's unresolved trauma, the scars of a marriage that tore him in half and left him carrying anger he still doesn't know how to unload. Remember the gravel push-ups? That raw display of energy earlier in the rehearsal wasn't just a workout, it was an exorcism. Ethan was pounding the ground like he was trying to beat something out of himself. And here, with that one misplaced name, we saw exactly what it was. Olivia still lingers. The marriage may be over, the ties may be cut, but the memories, the pain, the bitterness, they haven't gone anywhere. They live in his body, in his reflexes, in the slip of his tongue. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because in families like the Plaths, words matter, silence is expected, politeness is demanded, but slips like this reveal what's really underneath. Ethan's life has been a constant tug-of-war between loyalty to his family, loyalty to his wife, and loyalty to himself. When those loyalties collapsed, he didn't just walk away clean. He carried the wreckage inside him, and calling Veronica Olivia was like opening the door to all of that wreckage in front of everyone. Think about the dynamics here. Ethan has spent years fighting to be heard, fighting to set boundaries with his parents, fighting to survive the fallout of his marriage to Olivia. He's exhausted. His anger simmers just below the surface, exploding into physical outbursts like push-ups and gravel, because he doesn't know where else to put it. That exhaustion makes mistakes inevitable. When you're carrying ghosts on your back, they will eventually bleed into the present, and in that rehearsal, they did. The reaction mattered too. Veronica, calm as always, didn't make it a spectacle, but others noticed. You could see the flicker in Isaac's face, the tension ripple through the group. Olivia may not be physically present anymore, but she's still a central character in Ethan's story. Every time her name resurfaces, the family remembers the fractures she represented, the fights, the ultimatums, the divide between Ethan and the rest of the Plaths. And for Ethan, that's unbearable. He doesn't want her ghost in the room, but he can't seem to banish it either. From a psychological angle, this was the most telling moment of the entire rehearsal. We saw how trauma lingers, how unresolved pain sneaks out when you least expect it. Ethan's slip wasn't just about misnaming someone, it was his subconscious shouting the truth. He hasn't healed, he hasn't moved on, and until he does, his body will keep carrying the burden,
His tongue will keep betraying him, and his anger will keep spilling into moments that should have been peaceful. Viewers at home caught it instantly, and reactions ranged from sympathy to concern. Some saw a man still broken by love gone wrong. Others saw proof of how deeply this family dynamic continues to wound him. But either way, no one missed the symbolism. The ghost of Olivia haunts Ethan, and by extension, it still haunts the Plaths. And here's the bigger theme. Ghosts of the past always bleed into the present when they're ignored. The Plaths have spent years pretending things were fine, putting on performances of unity, controlling the narrative. But ghosts don't care about performances. They show up in slips of the tongue, in cracks in authority, in gravel push-ups at a wedding rehearsal. And every time they show up, they remind us that the past is never really gone until you deal with it. For Ethan, the exhaustion is catching up. His body shows it, his temper shows it, and now even his words show it. He's carrying too much, and he doesn't have the tools to put it down. That's why he lashes out physically, why he wrestles with control, why he can't fully step into peace. His unresolved marriage, his fractured family ties, his anger at authority, his weariness, it's all connected. And the Olivia slip proved it in one brutal instant. So while the rest of the family focused on flowers and vows, Ethan's slip reminded us of the real story, a man who can't escape his past, no matter how hard he tries. He's haunted, he's angry, and he's exhausted. And until he faces those ghosts head on, they'll keep bleeding into his present, sabotaging his attempts at peace. That one word, Olivia, wasn't just a mistake, it was a revelation. The past isn't done with Ethan, and neither are the scars that family and marriage left behind. Isaac had been holding it in all day. He's the sibling who usually fades into the background, the one who tries to stay steady while everyone else gets loud. But sitting in that parked truck, the words finally ripped out of him. He called Zach lazy. He flat out labeled him a red flag. And in that moment, the quiet brother became the loudest truth teller in the entire family. For viewers, it was shocking, but also inevitable. Because Isaac has been forced to watch his sister Lydia bend over backwards for Zach. He's seen her smile through his demands, give up her preferences, and carry the weight of making things work. And Isaac, loyal to Lydia, couldn't take it anymore. His rant wasn't just about Zach being difficult over a suit color. It was about a pattern of behavior. Zach taking while Lydia gave. It was about a marriage built on imbalance, before it even began. That word, lazy, cut deeper than it seemed. Lazy in relationships doesn't just mean someone who doesn't do chores. It means someone who expects the other person to carry the load, emotionally, mentally, and yes, even financially. Isaac could see it, even if Lydia refused to admit it in the glow of engagement. And calling Zach a red flag, that wasn't sibling teasing. That was Isaac putting words to what the whole audience was already whispering. This wasn't love. This was control dressed up as commitment. And while Isaac was raging in the truck, Ethan was breaking down in his own way. His push-ups earlier had already told us how much anger he was carrying. The slip of Olivia's name showed us how haunted he still was. By the time Isaac snapped, Ethan was boiling over too. These two brothers, one silent until he couldn't be, the other loud in his silence, mirrored each other's exhaustion. Both of them were done playing nice for the sake of appearances. Meanwhile, Lydia's bridal glow began to dim. She started the rehearsal smiling, looking every bit the picture-perfect bride. But you could see it in her eyes as the day unraveled. The weight of everyone else's baggage was pressing onto her shoulders. Her wedding rehearsal was supposed to be about joy, about love, about her future. Instead, it turned into a battlefield, where brothers raged, mothers confessed humiliation, and her fiancé was dragged as a walking red flag. By the time the dust settled, the wedding wasn't shining anymore. It was cracking. What should have been a celebration became a stage for collapse. The colors, the chairs, the Pinterest details, they couldn't disguise the fact that this family wasn't just dealing with stress. They were falling apart in plain sight. And that's the most haunting takeaway. This wasn't a wedding. It was a performance, a cover, a desperate attempt to convince everyone, including themselves, that the Plaths could still hold it together. But the truth slipped through. In gravel push-ups, in blue suits, in humiliating confessions, in slips of names, and in Isaac's truck rant. By the end, all the family's private fractures were public.
No decorations could hide them. No smiles could erase them. This wasn't a wedding. It was a family collapse, dressed up in pretty clothes. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think Isaac was right? Was Zach the real red flag in all of this? Or do you think the Plath family dynamics made it impossible for anyone to win here? Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because every week on Reality Scandals Daily, we pull back the curtain on the moments reality TV tries to polish over. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.